Hello and welcome to VistaTalks, interesting discussions with interesting people from all around the world. I'm your host for today, Simon Hodgkins. It's a pleasure and a delight to introduce you to Lynda Wilkes-Green. Lynda is the founder of a really fascinating business. And I'm not gonna give you any more details. I'm gonna say welcome to Lynda, welcome her to the show, and maybe ask Lynda just to tell us a little bit about herself and her company name and what it's about before we get started. Lynda, welcome to Vista Talks.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here. I am Lynda Wilkes-Green. I'm the founder of Ahlya, which is a period tracking and cycle syncing wellness app. I started building Ahlya on the 27th of December last year, so almost a full year. And it was born out of a personal struggle I had with hormone issues like polycystic ovary syndrome, premenstrual syndrome, and kind of all the associated side effects. I, like many other women, was given the contraceptive pill and never really told what was happening to my body. And, you know, my symptoms were masked over, but the root cause was never addressed. I eventually kind of hit a low point on my wedding day when I had a breakout and thought the pill is no longer for me. I'm going to try find another solution. So I dove headfirst into all the research and started trying to understand my cycle and making more holistic choices in sync with what was happening, which kind of ultimately led me to cycle syncing, which is the premise of what Ahlya does. So the concept is simple. It helps women understand their hormonal cycle and then make lifestyle changes accordingly in sync with that.
Well, thanks very much for that. And it's a powerful founding story. I want to ask you a little bit about the tech because you're talking about this sort of personalized approach, but it's got tech in there. Could you expand on that just a little bit for us, Lynda?
Yeah, so I think a lot of women will have tried period tracking apps in the past, say something like Flow or Clue, which are really great if you want to track your period. But I wanted to go one step further with Ahlya and actually use the data to give personalized insights to the user. So we do that by the user logging their menstrual cycle, how they're feeling each day, and we also connect with their wearables. So, your Apple Watch, your Aura Ring, whatever else you're wearing. And then we have built in artificial intelligence, which takes that data and produces personalized insights for that user on a daily basis. So, for example, if you've logged that you have headaches all the time when you are in your luteal phase, it will flag that to you for your upcoming one so that you can kind of manage your symptoms accordingly.
Well, that's very interesting. And I suppose, is it too early to see the benefits or are you tracking? I'm sure users can track the benefits, right? But I'm thinking about things like mental clarity, energy, maybe that overall well-being aspects. Are you seeing that with your users of the service and the product today? And how do you see that? How are you tracking that as a business founder, Lynda?
Yeah, I'm staying really close to the kind of early customers at this stage in the journey, constantly asking them for feedback, how they're finding everything. A lot of people are really kind of highlighting the holistic approach. So instead of just focusing on the physical symptoms, it's also the mental. So by every day, writing something quickly in their gratitude journal in the app, it just kind of helps them shift their mindset to if they're having a bad day suddenly or forced to focus on something positive. And just even little shifts like that can really just affect your overall well-being. And I think it's just kind of taking this holistic approach that focuses both on the mental and the physical that people like are able to join the dots for the first time that they haven't been able to do so before.
Yeah, and I think because it takes that, I was going to say 360, but that, as you said, that holistic approach to your life, I suppose. It's a more rounded view because there's lots of apps that just do one thing or a couple of things. So that's great. And I want to ask you, obviously, as an important topic like this, which is also being enhanced with technology, as you've explained. As a female founder looking to grow and scale a business, there's lots of talk about that at the moment. We hear about tech bros, we hear about Silicon Valley. What's it like right now in the current environment, in this wave of AI that we're all experiencing, and stock market highs at the time of recording, etc. What's it actually like on the ground, trying to grow a business, trying to think about scaling, trying to think about going international at some stage in the future? What's it actually like, Linda, from your perspective?
It's tough out there for sure, particularly for female founders, which I think, we've been talking about for years at this point. I think a lot of the businesses getting funding that you see in the news are things like the defense tech, the vibe coding platforms. But I think that there is this huge opportunity to use AI for good for underserved people and underserved purposes. And women's health is one of those areas. I felt like the guys sitting around the table were never going to think how AI could be used to help women understand their hormones. So I took it upon myself to do that. And it's early days in the journey. I think people are definitely willing to listen and they're interested in the purpose and the mission behind the app and using AI for this alternative purpose. But it's definitely important just to kind of keep pushing this mission forward and not kind of being overshadowed by the more flashy AI products and tools that are being built by male founders in particular.
Well, that's great. And I suppose with Alia, the challenges are you're talking to a pretty diverse audience, whether that's, in terms of their geography, whether it's in terms of their cultural narratives. And I'm just wondering, how do you go about thinking about empowering women across that cross section? Because you're trying to marry the data-driven insights, right, with, well, instead of generalized advice, which there seems to be a lot of out there.
Yeah, it's definitely something I've been considering because I want Alia to be, a global company. One market in particular that I've kind of been thinking a lot about is India, and I've been speaking with Femtech India to kind of run a pilot there and see how the app is received in that culture and what tweaks we need to make because I fully appreciate that what works in, say, a Western culture will be quite different in other countries. And I think it's going to be an ongoing process of kind of trying to understand the cultural nuances across the globe, and it's definitely like one of the challenges as we scale. But I think having kind of a link in these different regions to help us promote the app and help us build in those areas is super important.
Such an important point because having the facts and the data from on the ground in the various areas that you're looking to expand into, I think is very helpful. And I suppose just going a little deeper on that personalization in health tech, which is a huge growing sector, it's evolving very, very rapidly, as you well know. And how are you focused on saying, well, how does Alia continue to deliver meaningful information? How does it continue to drive individual support, for the user, that particular person? Because you can, I think, overcomplicate also the user experience, that UX environment, particularly in a sort of app-driven, smart tech, health tech environment. It's kind of, it can become overwhelming too. Are you giving any thought to that? How are you approaching that topic, Linda?
Yeah, that was one of kind of the core founding beliefs for me was I wanted something simple and digestible. I think a lot of the apps out there are great, but there's so much information, they're almost quite overwhelming when you open them. As a lawyer, I'm kind of very much of the principle that less is more when it comes to sharing information. And I've taken that approach with the app. I've spent probably half the development time was designing a user-friendly UX that was calming, aesthetic, and just delivered the important information in a digestible way. And kind of as part of that development, I sent, different examples to users and asked them what they actually wanted. And as part of the kind of ongoing process, I'm always asking for feedback as to if something's not working, how could we improve it? Because I do think, as you say, there's so much information out there, especially in an app or in health tech, and the user's attention span is quite short these days, thanks to things like TikTok. So it's important that we kind of deliver the key information upfront in a super quick and easy way.
Just a quick follow on to that. So does that mean you have to continually adapt and change, or are you putting most of that research up front, getting sort of use cases and examples from your users and saying, no, this fits a particular type of user, or is it you're constantly having to iterate, Linda?
No, I did a lot of the research up front before building and then designed with kind of the user feedback in mind. Um, there's always going to be users who've got questions about specific aspects of the app, but I'm trying to just go with the majority. And I think where we've got to now is like a good solid base that's pretty intuitive for the majority of the people. I think, there's always going to be comments about, how you could improve certain aspects, but you also just need to be realistic as well at the same time.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I think the technology of Alia and what you're doing, it's obviously a very helpful service and tool that you're providing. But as you think about scaling and going global, we like to talk about, going international on our show. And you must be thinking about other audiences. You gave us an example earlier, for example, of working with people in India, for example. But when you look to expand, are you thinking UK, Ireland, Europe, further afield? Are you thinking US? Are you thinking Asia? Or do you see this ultimately as being able to roll out into a lot of major geographic environments? What's your hope for the business, really, Lynda?
Right now, we've kind of targeting UK, Ireland, US, and those are the biggest markets in terms of downloads so far. But, we've had downloads in places like Ecuador, Venezuela, like pretty much like all over the globe so far, which I think is a testament to like how global this app can be. And it's obviously resonating with people right across the globe already, which is a really positive sign. So I I think, women experience menstrual cycles whether they live in Ireland or Uganda. So, of course, there's going to be cultural nuances, but I think the mission and the purpose are resonating globally already, which is really great.
And a huge discrepancy in information and availability in lots of countries around the world. And I wanted to ask you as well about growing a business because I know your career, you've got a lot of experience, you work in high performance environments throughout your career. But has your journey so far, particularly as well in founding such an exciting opportunity with Alia, um, does it change the way you think about things, how you personally focus, your own productivity, and I suppose ultimately your leadership style? Because to grow, we seem to, I know we add AI these days, but we still have to add people, don't we? How has it impacted you and the way your career journey in terms of the way that you approach things now, Lynda?
Yeah, I think early on in my career journey as a lawyer, I was working, 16, 20-hour days sometimes. And that was the norm back then. I think as I've kind of progressed in my career and also as society has changed a bit, I think there's kind of this alternative ambition. And I now kind of focus on doing high impact stuff that are and being efficient with my time and also just looking after myself. I think it's as important. A business can only grow as quickly as the founder grows. So you need to protect your own energy. And for me, that's, working out in the morning before I go into the craziness of the day. I think as much as we like to talk about kind of the 996 hustle culture, that isn't going to work for everyone. And I don't think you have to necessarily follow that in order to be a successful founder. I think success can look quite different. And for me, that I'm kind of hoping to pave the way and showing that it's possible.
It's fascinating that you've mentioned 996. I was only listening to a VC very early this morning, and they're so obsessed with focused on 996 founders, people who will just keep going no matter what. And yet, when you hear the success stories of lots of businesses, they don't approach it that way, particularly in health, particularly when it comes to well-being. It's not necessarily aligned, but there's kind of arguments to both sides of that story. It's fascinating that you mentioned that, and particularly this VC was talking to a large media outlet in the UK, and they were counter arguing and saying, well, for parents, for example, that's not always possible, and yet there are plenty of examples where 996 isn't deployed. Um, And I suppose there's lots of examples where even more than 996 is deployed. So
Yeah.
it's a tough one, but I appreciate you sharing that. I suppose on somewhat the flip side of that, I want to ask you about misconceptions about business then. Um, are there sort of anything that you've encountered that you think, oh, that's completely the opposite than what I thought? Has there been any sort of big misconceptions that you've encountered throughout your journey about business in general, Linda?
I think there's quite a lot of misconceptions at the moment around kind of like the vibe coding platforms and, anyone can build something and ship it in a day. I think you can build something in a day, and I've tried it, but is it going to be something that's user friendly that someone's willing to pay for? No. Like, I think I've built a product over the course of a year, and it's now, I think, I get amazing feedback on it. It's thoughtful, it works, it protects data. I think, of course, I could have shipped something a lot quicker, but it just wouldn't have been up to the standard that the users deserve or that I was happy with. So I think there's definitely a balance that needs to be struck in terms of moving quickly, but also kind of taking the appropriate steps to make sure you're doing everything properly as well, in terms of whether that's regulatory compliance or just like general ethics.
Yeah, excellent points. And I suppose it leads me on to the question of, as you look ahead through the lens of your business, how are you thinking about the intersection and the future of how AI, personalized health, uh, women's well-being evolving as we look forward? What are the opportunities and challenges that are exciting you that are on the horizon, Linda?
I think this kind of ties back to one of the earlier points I made about, AI is being used for various different purposes. And I just want to make sure that it is being used for something like women's health. I think we're already seeing a gender gap in terms of the use of AI itself. I think 50% of men are using it, but 30% of women. And I can only imagine that's going to kind of increase. So I wanted to include AI in this app to show women that it's not scary, it can be helpful, and it's something that, even if you can embrace in a tiny part of your life, like you kind of need to embrace it or you're going to get left behind. So, um, yeah, I think it's just important that we include women in these conversations and make it something accessible rather than kind of exclusionary.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's wonderful to be able to discuss this topic with you today. And I just want to ask you if people want to find out more about the company, if they want to download the app, where do we send them to? Is it a company website you want to share? Are they better off going to sort of the app stores and the Google Play stores? Where do you want to point people to, Linda?
Yeah, so you can find us on the App Store, Google Play. It's spelled Ahlya, and also our website is ahlya.com, and we're also on Instagram. So always feel free to get in touch.
There you go. So you've been encouraged to join Linda and the team on her going global journey. That really brings us nicely to the end of our discussion today with Lynda Wilkes-Green. I want to thank everybody who's watching or listening to this episode around the world. I'm going to ask you, of course, to tune in again to see and or listen to the next VistaTalks show, where once again we'll be discussing some really interesting topics and people going global from all over the world. And thanks very much, Linda, for talking to us today. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. It was so nice to chat.